Hello everybody, Max of Pilots and Prop Wash here, and I thought I would talk briefly about the Cessna versus Piper trainer debate. Good friend of mine and I have flown both of these aircraft together. He's a Piper man, I'm more of a Cessna man, and I thought I would go over the reasons we each think the other airplane's better or worse. Now, the four aircraft we're going to deal with primarily are the Piper Tomahawk, the Piper Cherokees, the PA-28 series, the Cessna 150 series, which will include the tail dragger and the Aerobat and the 152, and the Cessna 172 series. Now, I have 1,161 hours of dual instruction given in these aircraft, and I really like them all. But they have their pluses and minuses, so let's just take a look at them. We'll start off with the Cherokee, an airplane that's been around for a very long time, has an excellent reputation, the PA-28 series. They go all the way from the little 150 horsepower models up to the 235 horsepower Dakota. And they come with a variety of wings. You have the standard constant chord wing known as the Hershey bar wing, the extended wing, and then later on the tapered wing. Now, these airplanes actually fly fairly differently, but we'll get back to that in a minute. We also have the Piper PA-38T Tomahawk. I actually flew a brand new one when they first came out, and it was radically different than what I had been flying before. Now, being that I was both a student and a flight instructor in Florida, both the Cherokee and the Tomahawk suffered the same affliction, and that was I was a student and a pilot and an instructor in Florida. Because they have the low wing, there's no shade in those cockpits, and they get hot. Also, except for a little storm window on the side, there's really not much in the way of any ventilation inside. Now, admittedly, the airplanes are easier to service on the ground because you don't need a ladder to put fuel in them, and you step up on the wing and step down in the airplane to board. But the simple fact remains that although you can taxi with the door open and the propeller giving you a little bit of breeze, when it comes time to take off, you have to button up inside that little plexiglass container, and off you go with the sun beating down on you. Once the sun goes down or it's nighttime, not a problem. Now, there is one nice thing about this low wing configuration, and that is as you're maneuvering in the traffic pattern, when you drop the wing to turn, you can see the runway very well. And that's a nice little plus. Upward visibility is excellent and forward visibility is okay. Downward forward visibility is good, but of course you can't see what's under you because of the wing. In contrast, the Cessna 150 series and the 172, being high-wing aircraft, have excellent downward visibility, but you tend to lose the runway on the turns in the pattern. But that's, to me, not a big deal, but it always bothered my friend. However, you do have to have a step stool or a ladder to put fuel in the airplanes because even though they come with a hand grip and a footstep on most models, you really don't want to put all your body weight on that little footstep and grab that little handle. You want a ladder. So they can be a bit more cantankerous to put petrol in. Now, another advantage, in my opinion, that the Cessna series has is the main landing gear is basically one piece of big spring steel. And you can say the same thing for the Piper Tomahawk. However, the Cherokees use oleo strut landing gears, and those can become a source of maintenance. There's an ongoing debate about the Cherokee's stabilator system versus the Cessna's using a conventional horizontal stabilizer and elevator. I have had Cherokees that had some maintenance issues because of the stabilator system, but I've never had any serious problem with it. The Cessnas have a strutted wing, the Cherokee does not, and unfortunately it was not that long ago that a trainer Cherokee did lose a wing due to fatigue. So one could make, I believe, a justifiable argument that Cessna has the stronger airframe. Also, because the landing gear on the Cessna goes into the belly of the airplane, when you do impose force on the landing gear, you're imposing it on the fuselage, not the wing spar. The Cessna has a high wing with the fuel tanks in it, so you have a gravity feed fuel system, and nothing beats gravity for feeding fuel. Pipers, of course, have to have an electric fuel pump as a backup to the mechanical pump. The airplanes are all comparable in performance, but if there is one thing I would note about the Cessna 150 series, it's that they've been accused of being almost too easy to fly, and they failed to prepare pilots for future higher performance aircraft. The Tomahawk, by design, is a higher performing airplane, requires higher ground speeds, etc. It cruises faster to outrun the Cessna 150, It basically was designed to prepare a pilot for a higher performance airplane. But as a result, it's not quite as unforgiving as a Cessna 150. The fuel management system's a little more complicated versus the very simple Cessna system of turn the tanks on and don't run out of fuel. The very Tomahawk that I used to fly in was later crashed by another student when he ran out of fuel on final approach and didn't switch tanks. He actually had several gallons in the other tank, but he was close to the ground when it happened, saw some power lines. He was not injured too badly, but the airplane was totaled out. Had that been a Cessna 150, it would have simply fed out of the other tank. There's one other little gotcha that rarely gets talked about. Since Cessnas have high wings, they don't have too much trouble with ground effect. Pipers, on the other hand, with the low wing, tend to feel the ground effect considerably more. And if you have the Piper with the extended wing or the tapered wing, which is extremely efficient, then you really have to be careful because the airplane will float down the runway on you once it gets in ground effect. The constant chord Pipers aren't really bad about it. They have a reasonably high amount of induced drag close to the ground. But the tapered wing Piper Cherokees have about half the induced drag of the constant chord wing. So if you carry a little extra energy in the tapered wing Piper and get close to the runway, once you get in ground effect, it will very likely start floating on you. All of the airplanes have comparable performance, about the same fuel burn, and they've all gotten very expensive over the years. You would think that as they've gotten older, they'd have gotten less expensive, but since for the most part they're not making any new ones, they're getting harder and harder to find and replace, so the price has stayed pretty high on all of them. The Cessna 150 series is probably the easiest of the lot to fly, whereas the Piper Tomahawk's a bit more challenging. Really, I think a more fun airplane in a lot of ways, and certainly quicker if you just want something to tootle around in. The Cherokees, my only real complaint with them, being a Florida-based pilot, is the sun just beats the life out of you. And also, I like my downward visibility. The Cessna 172 has a gravity feed fuel system, a strutted wing, 2 entry doors, and a conventional tail. It's just, in my opinion, the best rounded of the lot. The Pipers tend to have more airworthiness directives on them. Now, this is not to mean that I don't like Pipers. I enjoy them immensely. But if given my druthers, especially as a flight instructor, I'd like to go with the 172. It's a touch more demanding than the 150 to fly, so the pilot gets prepared for something a little more capable, and it's just a hint more of a gentleman's affair. Well, such is my opinion. What say you?